Yes, we are live. Let me put up, here we go. I'm just trying to. All right. We're on in 1 minute. Yes, Martins, if you could keep speaking or moving, and that way you're front. You're showing up front.
30 seconds and counting. All right. Okay. So we'll go ahead and begin. It's 7 o'clock. Here we go. All right, good evening. My name is Pastor Martins Williams from Living Word Christian Fellowship in Suffern, New York. And welcome to our very first Table Talk round table discussion webinar, where we are laying it on the table. The Table Talk series is a new ministry of Living Word Christian Fellowship. And just in a culture where secular worldview is dominant, our hope is that this panel discussion will offer a biblical perspective on various topics and to help individuals see the relevance and the application of God's word to their daily lives. So we welcome all of you who have joined us, all of you who are watching tonight. Our prayer is that you would leave this discussion feeling informed and feeling a sense of renewed hope and peace. So the topic that we're discussing tonight is school reentry. And some school districts in the area are following a complete remote model where teachers instruct synchronously as students travel throughout their daily classes. So they're doing instruction where the students are learning virtually and using a platform such as Google Meet. And there are other districts who are doing a hybrid model where students engage in both in-person and virtual learning. And we know that this is a major topic of interest and a topic of concern as well. So we have assembled a panel of guests to help us unpack this issue. Would you help me welcome tonight? We have joining us Dr. Icy Fergus-Rowe, who is a cardiologist and also associate professor of medicine at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Welcome, Dr. Icy. How are you? It's so good to have you tonight. Thank you. We also have joining with us Hazel Roseborough, who is a school principal in the Bronx. How are you doing tonight, Hazel?
Fine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We also have with us tonight Min Kim, who is a public school teacher who specializes in ELL. How are you doing tonight, Min?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And finally, we also have Vanessa Chenko, who is a mother of a high school senior. Hi, Vanessa. How are you?
How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we also have John Baruch, who is a father of 4 school-age children. John, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of our viewers. We also have with us tonight Grace Reekbeest, who is also a public school teacher. How are you doing tonight, Grace?
Wonderful.
That's so great to hear. All right, so we're going to go ahead and begin. And the question on everybody's minds tonight, I think for parents, for grandparents, anybody who's a guardian, anybody who has children, you know, K through 12, the question is, how can schools just keep our children safe during this time? In particular, how can schools ensure social distancing guidelines are followed? How can they ensure that everything we know to do is actually going to happen? So I don't know if any of our panel guests would like to just address that question, because I think it's a question on all of our minds.
So so currently setting up school in my school district, it is a combination of remote learning for families who choose to do so, and also of hybrid. On October 1st, the students will be coming into school. And so we've tried to put a number of safety protocols in place. We have socially distanced signs in the hallways, in the classrooms. The classrooms have no more than 9 students, in some cases 7, all spread out 6 feet apart more where we can. Students will have to wear masks. They won't be moving around in my school. They will be staying in classes, and the teachers will be moving to try to mitigate as much, spread as possible. As we know, I have a high school, and students love to be in hallways and walking, and they're social creatures, right? We're all social creatures, and it's a challenge. But there are a lot of those basic sanitizing that happens multiple times a day, or on the hour throughout. Rules. We've done orientation. I've done orientation with my students to help them understand what the guidelines are and why they're in place. And how they can be helpful, because I think that's part of it too, is students have to understand their interest in following the rules and doing those specific things. In my school district, they will be doing random testing of staff and students. And students will need to be tested if they're selected, and if their families opt out, then they go on remote instruction. So there'll be a periodic testing. So I think that given the circumstances, that we're all trying to do the best that we can to ensure that when students walk into the building, for those families who decide that they're feeling safe. We also have entrance and exits at different places and staggered times to sort of make sure that there are not as many students entering or exiting at the same time. That that's there as well, just to make sure. And also there is a total virtual world now. So there are not textbooks or anything that's used that can kind of where multiple people are touching. So everything will be done in Google or other applications that we have. But again, I really want to say one of the most important things is having your child understand the safety rules. So I would say be familiar with what they are for your school district, and then have a conversation with your child about why is it important to follow these? Why, is it important to have that face mask? Why is it important to socially distance? So that, again, they can really understand that it is about caring for themselves and others, as the word tells us to do. And so that is an important concept for them to grasp.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think you know, the takeaway there is that there certainly are a lot of precautions in place and things to protect our children. So that fear that some parents, that some guardians might be experiencing, certainly while we understand it, those things have been put, the measures have been put in place. I don't know if Grace or Kim, you want to speak to that at all. Hazel spoke at a high school level. What does it look like at the elementary level?
So our district actually started hybrid like 2 weeks ago. We're actually entering week 3. So far we are rolling. We have like the younger ones, of course, is harder than the older ones wearing the mask, but we do have signs like Hazel mentioned all over the building. We do have arrows on the floors for direction, so we could check the flow of the traffic of kids moving in and out. All the parents are required to test their kids' temperature, and we have a health portal on the website that the parents have to check in every morning before they send their kid to school, including the staff as well, to put what temperature the kid or the staff has before coming in. Yeah, the class, we're in a hybrid model. So there's a Tuesday, Thursday group and a Wednesday, Friday group that comes in. So therefore, our class sizes are smaller, definitely. Yeah, we have plexiglasses all over set up in the office, you know, in the cafeteria where they're eating lunch. They sit in individual seats. In the classrooms, all the desks or tables are 6 feet apart. There's sanitizing, like, you know, there's, you know, always sanitizing the station always in front of the door. So before entering and exiting, they're all required to wipe their hands. And we're constantly telling them, you know, hands to yourself and all that with the little ones, but it's
hard.
Yes.
Hard.
They like to
Yeah.
cuddle and they like to hug and they like to touch. So, but yeah, so far we're reinforcing the rules. And like Hazel said, we're talking to the parents and, you know, reinforcing the importance of how to follow these rules and how important it is. So far, I think, you know, we are good. We are still going to school tomorrow, Grace. So
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So it seems like certainly in the school building, right, we have all of those measures in place. So one of the questions that we received, not in the school building, but the school bus. There are some parents that are just really worried about the school bus, you know, what goes on the school bus, just the circulation, especially as we get into the colder months and the windows possibly not being able to be propped open. What would you say to a parent who's asking, should I let my child ride the school bus? Dr. Go ahead, Hazel.
No, go ahead, Dr. Icy, you can start that one.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad to do so. I actually also have a son and he goes to high school. So I'm very obviously concerned about that. And he's in a relatively small bus. So I think what they did, at least with his bus, is that they limited the number of kids on the bus, similarly to what I would say do in a patient examination room, so that the kids are not sitting in the same, you know, close to each other in the same seat, or maybe not even the same row. However, here are my concerns and how they could be addressed. The bus, you would assume, has been wiped down, disinfected before the kids get into it. But as each child walks onto the bus is not being disinfected after each child gets on the bus. And kids are not wearing gloves, at least some of them are not wearing gloves. If their hands are soiled, you know that hands of like the medium of, you know, contracting any kind of infection. So if they're walking by and touching seats, even if the seats were previously disinfected, that might be an opportunity for infection. You also mentioned about, yeah, as it gets colder, of course, the windows will be closed. And we know that the 6 feet distance that they're talking about now may even not be enough. And if you do experiments, you see that potentially aerosolized saliva or any liquids can travel further. So yes, they may be circulating within the bus. So the best way of mitigating this is for children or students to wear their masks. The masks protect them and protect others.
Yeah.
So it minimizes their spread of liquids from going out, and it also minimizes particles from coming in. So the best case scenario is to continue to wear those masks. Also, they should, as soon as they get off the bus, they need to clean their hands, maybe wash their hands. If they have hand sanitizer, they should use it. I give that to my son and I ask him to use it. So, you know, constantly washing hands and constantly cleaning hands once getting off the bus is important. The other thing is you tell children to try and keep their hands away from their faces, because even though their nose and their mouth are covered, there have been cases of people contracting the virus through their eyelashes, okay?
Wow.
Yes, if somebody sneezes, the liquid, the droplets can go on your eyelashes or into your eyes. It can also go onto hair, okay? So, you know, when children get home, I know people maybe have kids do their baths in the morning. It's probably better to do it soon as they get home. So whatever, you know, germs or whatever, you know, elements of infection that are on them gets washed away. So that's what I would recommend regarding traveling on the bus and then what happens immediately after getting off.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Icy. Hazel, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated in our district because while there is the school bus, there is also, because I have many parents call every day and email every day about public transportation. Because within the city, the students have to, if they're not walking, which is not most students, especially not at high school level, they have to take the train or they have to take the bus, right? Public transportation. And so I would truly say that those same precautions would be taken, but it does open it up to a little bit more of a tricky dynamic. You know, how many people are on the train? How many people are on the bus? How many people are you passing from when you leave your home to when you get to the door? Right. I mean, that's the thing that's important, which again is why it's important to speak to your child because, you know, are they meeting up with a friend on that bus or on that train, you know, and, you know, sometimes we need to make sure that they're still keeping their mask on. You know, so in a place like a school bus, they might have a matron where they can, you know, remind students to do so. In a place where students are traveling independently, it may be a little bit more of a challenge. And so, again, it's just another layer that kind of poses a different set of risks, which is the truth is that there, you know, those risks are real and those risks are there. And families are really going to have to decide based on their child's health, their family health, whatever the dynamics are, is that exposure something that they're willing to, you know, endure as a family and for their child.
Yeah, absolutely. Both Hazel and Dr. Icy spoke about, you know, some of the preventative measures that students can take to decrease the likelihood of contracting COVID. I'm thinking in particular of the little ones, you know, the smaller ones. It's one thing, and even the older ones in a high school setting. I'm an educator as well, and I have to constantly remind my students who are 14 and 15 years old to keep that mask on. I'm wondering if anybody at all on the panel has any suggestions about creative ways that we could encourage our children, young children, but maybe older children as well, to develop and practice good hygiene routines. Are there any creative things? I know elementary school teachers are wonderful with little songs or little reminders or mnemonic devices. Is there anything at all creatively that you could suggest that might help parents and guardians out there?
I think, you know, we have some things that we're doing with our students, which are mass decorating, you know, in terms of having them like take those, we're having them do some PSAs for their peers, which they're working on now, which will air and send out an email form to our students and families and also put on our website. So I think the more involved that students are, and I think just really the cold hard facts I think there's a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of confusion that's out there. But I think when it comes back to it, especially at the high school level, students understand the cold hard facts if given it to them appropriately. And so I think also that that's something that they can understand is a way of showing community, a way of showing school spirit, of pride, of all of those things, of family pride. Like even we had one student that was like, oh, my family, we're going to do like a family shield and we're all going to like wear that mask and we're going to have like a family shield, you know, which I thought was great. And I would also say it's how well do we, I also have a teenager who is 16, and how well do we practice for them, right? What they're seeing so that they in turn it becomes this thing that's a lifestyle more as just when I go here or when I go there, but that we're doing it as well at home when we go to the supermarket, when we have to interact with others. I think it's making it part of a lifestyle would really help, so it doesn't feel like it's just something I just have to do, you know, because I'm going to school, but something that's like, no, this is a lifestyle that we need to adopt right now, and this is how we can make it fun or make it creative.
So I also would like to add to that. And what I did was I wrote a series of books that are geared towards children. So this one is called Rona, You Are Not Welcome in My Body. And it talks about the coronavirus, breaks down what it is, how it's contracted, how do you manage it. It has fun ways of dealing with it. Here's a picture of a guy coughing, and you could see the germs coming out of his mouth, but the mask is there. So it blocks the germs from getting into the person's face. It has a lot of interactive, you know, types of things. It talks about what happens if you get sick, what are the symptoms when you go to the doctor, what are the risk factors, the unhealthy living. It talks about pets. Can you catch it from a pet? It shows you the organs. So very interactive. You could place pictures and so on. It has a glossary that defines terms. So this one is probably for kids like 6 and above. And then for little children, because I think Pastor Martens talked about little kids that are little. So how can they understand? And this one is more of a coloring book. And it shows, you know, kids, you know, what some of the things that they can do to protect themselves and so on from coronavirus through coloring and you know, interaction. So another creative way of really having something on hand to look at, to read, to ask questions, to discuss or read with an adult, like a parent. It's written in a way that parents or grandparents can understand and interact with their children. So that's another creative way of really getting the message across and you know, ensuring that kids really understand what they should do.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful resource, Dr. Icy, and we want to get the information out there for anybody who would like to purchase that resource. As a church also, we are going to be giving away 5 of your books, Dr. Icy's books. So we are going to be just randomly selecting viewers who are with us tonight, who are watching, and we just want to put some resources in your hand. We just want to gift it to you. So you will be notified of that. And certainly if you want to purchase Dr. Icy's resource, then we will make that information available to you as well. Wonderful, wonderful resource. So Hazel, you were talking about the cold hard facts, and Dr. Icy, you were sharing cold hard facts with us as well. And we know that you know, with COVID-19, it's shrouded in mystery. Things are still, it seems sometimes daily evolving. Dr. Icy, we want to ask you and your professional, your medical expertise. People are wondering, if you have COVID, if you get it one time, are you able, based on the research and what's current, are you able to get it again? Can you be reinfected?
I think that's a fantastic question. I think that there have been 1 or 2 cases that have been documented of possible reinfection. But remember, this is a virus. Virus replicates. Viruses change. And so when you look at the influenza virus, that replicates and changes from one year to another. In fact, you may have several different ones in a given year, which is why a vaccine for the flu virus, for instance, doesn't necessarily cover every possible infection, because someone may ask, well, you know, I got the flu vaccine, how come I got the flu again? So in the same case, this virus is called a coronavirus. There's a lipid layer surrounding the protein, and that can mutate over time, and so can become slightly different. So when you do become infected with a virus or any infection, your body creates a response called an antibody production. And so we can test the blood to see if the person has antibodies. If you have a high level of antibody, being reinfected, even with a mutated virus being around, you would be relatively protected. However, what we're finding is that some people have a reduction in their antibodies. So someone who may have had the virus in March and they had very high antibodies, if we repeat it today, you may see a lowering of that antibody, or some people don't even have that antibody anymore. So if you don't have that antibody anymore, or if you have a very low level, then you can be reinfected if the virus again comes across. So therefore you have to act as if you can always potentially be infected, and always take precautionary measures, because this virus is quite tricky and we do not have all of the answers yet. But the evidence suggests that it can be possible to be reinfected, particularly if your antibodies have dissipated.
Wow, thank you so much. Along the same vein, there are some people who are just thinking about medical questions as well. They want to know what you can share about juvenile COVID cases. Are there distinct symptoms for children, or is it the same across the board? We had a lot of questions actually around this whole issue of children and how the symptoms manifest. I don't know, Dr. Icey, if you're able to speak to that at all.
Sure, I can briefly speak to that. So one thing to remember is that 80% of people will not have symptoms, and that includes children. So probably a higher percentage of children may not have symptoms. So they may have very mild symptoms that they don't, actually even recognize. But the cases of children that have been described that have been pretty sick and detrimental, it's almost like an overwhelming inflammatory response to the virus. They describe it as something, there's a disease that's called Kawasaki's disease, which is basically an inflammatory response. And so the body basically goes crazy and part of it is because the kids are so young, they haven't had time to develop some of the mechanisms that we have had to fight off, things. So when they recognize this antigen coming in, that's what the virus is, an antigen. There's a whole series of bodily responses, things called interleukins, cytokines, TNF factor, all of these things that get, produced in the body, intended to be protective, but because it's such a wide, release of cytokines, the body can just shut down. And so what happens with this inflammation, the blood vessels get leaky and organs don't work, so that people can bleed, they can have clots. People meaning kids, they can bleed, they can have clots, and their organs can shut down. Their hearts can fail, their lungs can fail, and it's sort of an overwhelming inflammatory process. What we do know, though, is a vast majority of these kids, they actually respond to steroid infusion. Because it's an inflammatory process, the steroids help to be anti-inflammatory. So many of the children have a very, very good response to that. However, they should, as soon as something like that starts to happen, you bring them in quickly, because the quicker you bring them in, the quicker you're able to save organs. Once you've had a demolition of organs, and it's harder to revive or save those organs.
Thank you, Dr. Icey. As we are hearing some of the cold, hard facts from you, Dr. Icey, I would imagine that, Hazel, as you said earlier, that there are parents and guardians who are making the best decision for their families. And that decision may very well be a fully remote model. So the question is, from some parents who are making that choice, we want to give them information and resource them as well. They're asking, if I choose the fully remote option, will my child receive an equitable education? The fear is, if my child is not coming into the classroom and other students are, how can the schools ensure that my child is getting what he or she needs? So if any of the educators or Hazel or anybody would like to speak to that, that'd be wonderful.
So in a lot of school districts, putting private schools aside, most of them are on a hybrid or on a remote. There aren't too many at this time that are fully open. And so the truth is that whether the child is in school for the hybrid, if they're only going to receive one day, possibly maybe 2 or 3, depending of direct and live instruction in a classroom. And so that's to bear in mind, I think, whether you do select remote or a hybrid, that the child is still not going to be in school for 5 days. So then you have to figure out, how do I make the best choice? I say health is first, knowing your child, knowing your family's history, and possibly, what they're more susceptible to or not. I think along with the education, it's if you are very active, and no matter, honestly, if the child is 5 days or 2 days or 3, I think parents and families have a very special role. And that is also to make sure that the child is engaged at home. And we know that not everyone may have access to the same technology, or, have the same socioeconomic status to be able to have like private tutoring, or, different pods that some families are able to do for their kids, so that, they're not going to fall behind. But I say familiarize yourself with your school's remote plan, and familiarize yourself with, if it's Google Classroom, make sure you understand Google Classroom, get some tutorials in Google Classroom. New York City Public Library or different, venues have a lot of it just online, so that you can understand how it works. And I would say you really need to be able to walk your child through a bit and see, especially if they're young. Though I feel like students and technology are, they're a little bit more tech savvy, I think, sometimes than the adults can be. But it can be a challenge when they're very little, right? And they're 6 years old or 5 years old, 7 years old. They need a parent to kind of help them. And what happens when you have multiple? I know, John, there's 4 kids to have to deal with. So I don't think that it means they're necessarily going to be left behind. It's not going to be the same, but I say families really need to make sure that they are doing things at home with their child that are going to keep them curious, that's going to keep them engaged, and that they're staying on top of what they need to do. If families, some can afford to have some other resources, they can do so, but there are a lot of free educational resources out there as well for them.
And
Wonderful,
speaking
Hazel.
as teachers, I just have to say that, we're working hard, we're working very hard behind the scenes, behind the screens, and trying to give your child all that they need in order to move further in their educational career, right? So, speak with the teachers, connect with the teachers. The little ones, they need your support, parents. They need you to sit there with them and monitor them. And I would even say for my own older kids that I have to monitor them. I have to check their, right now, my district where I live is using Schoology instead of Google Classroom. So I have to now get familiar with Schoology and learn how to navigate around that. But those teachers are working hard, and they're doing everything they can. Reach out to them, talk to them, email them, and just be understanding at this point too, because it's new to them. Yep, that's it.
And also, like, I think for the little ones, it's always helpful to have like a routine going. Like our district is having, if it's a remote day, they provided like a rubric, like a schedule that they can follow. So there's certain classes that they would have to complete, or assignments in the morning, and then there's like a little break time, and then like movements even in between, the classes, and then they'll have to still go on. So establishing a routine, and definitely, like Grace said, like connecting with your teachers, like if there's concerns, reach out, because yes, we are working hard behind the scenes, and we are working every day to get that, the standards and all that going. So.
Absolutely, Min. I want to address this question to you, Min, because I know that your concentration is with ELL students in particular. And so the question here, as we talk about different segments of the student population, my child is an ELL student, how will hybrid and distance learning affect him or her? So, it's another layer added on when we're speaking about ELL students. I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all.
So because of COVID last year, usually if you're an ENL student, you would be tested annually. Last year, it did not happen. So the only downside is if your child was a level last year, they couldn't move up or exit out of the program because there was no test given last year. So the state has provided some assessments. So we have been doing some assessments to assess where your child is at this point. So all the teachers are trying to figure out, whether your child made some progress, can move up a level, and they're scheduling the minutes and the sessions accordingly to that, their newer level. So we are taking measures to assess them before we place them for the minutes. We're still providing the mandate, like the state mandate minutes. There was a guideline. There were it could be a mixture. So for in our district, for instance, we have about like 40 minutes allocated for online, and then the others, all the ENL students are coming into school every single day, given the option to come in every single day to get more services and the minutes required met. Also, if you're 100% remote with ENL services, we're Zooming them in. So we are doing Google Meets, and we're providing them with remote learning sessions also. So we are still providing them according to their language level and supporting them. And the funny thing is my colleague was making fun of me the other day because we're actually wearing like clear masks and on top, so they could still articulate and practice the listening and the speaking with us. Other ones, we have a mask that shows our mouth so we could practice the pronunciation also. So we have some little things that are working, but yes, we are still trying to meet the minutes and provide the right services that they need at this point.
Wonderful, wonderful. Just to continue with that theme, there's a question from parents and guardians who have students who have, or children who have an individualized education plan, an IEP. And so the concern, of course, there with the IEP, very much like with an ENL student, is the minutes, the time, and making sure that all of those services are, that the children are receiving those services that they're entitled to. So I'm wondering if the teachers or Hazel at all, if you could speak to just students with IEPs and how we are meeting their needs in this very different environment.
Okay, I'll start. So very similarly to the students who are English language learners, students with IEPs also still have the right, and schools still have to provide the service of meeting those needs. So it could be if a student is having speech or hearing, they still will have those virtually in cases where they're remote, or in some school districts, the students have the option to come in an extra day or multiple days to receive their services. And I think what's really important is to really do understand what the child's IEP says and what the services are, because that's really important. If you want to make sure that your child is getting all of the services that they're entitled to, it's really important to kind of familiarize yourself with the document. And if your child is older, have them learn to familiarize themselves with the document as well, so they can advocate for themselves and be able to understand how they learn best. And so there are programs and software. I know in my school we have additional software supports for students, all students, but particularly some catered towards students who have IEPs, whether it's having something that may need to be read aloud to them, or in their native language, or different things like that to have. They are still getting counseling, individual and group if that is on their IEP, from the social workers and the guidance counselors that they have. And they're still trying to have specific Google Meets with students in small groups or individualized so that they get that instruction in the area that they need. So if they're getting sets, or maybe they're in an ICT class where it normally has 2 teachers, and possibly a para. So I know for us, we still have the setup where students are getting the extra support from the teachers, who again are really, I have to just recognize the tremendous amount of work that they are doing to meet the needs of every single student, which is always a challenge, but especially given now. So there are lots of things in place to help your child have their IEP needs met. And I would say to make sure that you're familiar with those needs so that you can be aware of if there's a breakdown somehow in the system and the child is not getting. I find that really important because you as families know how your child learns best. Practice at my school is we meet with every family that has a child with an IEP entering our school in 9th grade, so that they can tell us about how they learn and what works best for them, because the families already have that experience, and we want to start strong and not kind of think about the needs they have. So again, just be familiar, and the teachers have worked really hard to have additional resources and the time that they're allotted, and the services, all services will be met, just some may be met virtually.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to shift just a little bit, and I want to give the parents an opportunity just to share. And as we've been talking about, the medical aspect, we've been talking about the school's responsibility. I just want to make it personal for a second. And I'm asking both Vanessa and John if you could speak to this. What have you observed as just the emotional, the social impact that this has had specifically on, I guess you could speak to your kids or just children in general? What have you observed? What have you seen just in the time that we were in quarantine, and then obviously with the school reentry?
All right, I'll go first. For what I've noticed in the beginning, she was anxious, especially after the school was closed. So yeah, she was anxious. She was I guess she heard it a lot from the media as well and from her friends. Um, we talk about it a little bit, and I try to reassure her as well that God is in control. That nothing in this world that's surprising to God. So, um, and what I said to her as well, just be careful. Wear your mask. You have to take care of yourself. And one thing I also noticed that I think our action reflects to the children. So if you are feeling really anxious, you're always worried about it. I think the kid sees that. So because after a few months, because in the beginning, yes, it worries me, but I still had to go to work. You know, I had to go out there and do my job. So but I tried my very best as well to, keep myself calm. And, my hope is in the Lord. What more can I do? I have to earn a living. So, but I guess the way she looked at it, that, because, okay, after a few months later, she asked me to go see her friends. I said, yeah, go ahead. As long as, you keep your distance, you keep it safe. It's not like a group of friends. It's just one at a time. I said, go ahead. It's fine with me. And and then when she came back, she asked me like, Mom, why aren't you crazy like all of those other parents? Like, because they're so crazy, like mandated them to wear masks, social distance. I said, you know what? You're supposed to do that, but I'm not gonna allow fear. I'm not gonna allow this virus to take over my life and take over our family. Because I mean, it sounds bad, but I, because to me, I feel like if it's our time, then it's my time to go. And God is in control. I mean, what more can I do? I just do the best that I can, and I thank God that my daughter sees that, and yeah, she takes precaution, but thank God that it's not really driving her crazy.
Thank you, Vanessa. John, if you would like to speak to that at all, you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you asked the question, what have we noticed? And I can speak of our own children as to what's happened within, starting the pandemic in itself. I'll be the first to say that uh, I have an incredible wife that notices more things than I ever do. Like I never understood. I'll be the first to say I'm bad cop, right? I'll be the bad
John,
cop.
you're getting major props from everybody right now. When you said I have an incredible wife, everybody smiled when you said that. Sorry for interrupting.
It's the truth, and it's eye-opening because she does notice the things that I never noticed, right? So when it comes to our four children, one huge thing that I noticed is their learning habits, right? I always put it on, oh, you're being lazy, or you just don't want to do it. She pointed out to me, it's just how they learn, how they take in the information, how it's transferred to them, and how they translate it back. And it's something that I never noticed, that we have four individual children with four individual personalities, that it's impossible. Like our first month that we had to do the homeschooling, the two of us was running back and forth between four computers, right? Sometimes it wouldn't work, one person, and we also have one that goes to school in the city. So it was eye-opening to how much attention certain students, certain kids needed, as opposed to the others that they just fly through it like it was nothing. So that's a big thing that I think we should focus on, in that just understanding the frustrations of your children, right? And where their breaking points are, because I noticed that's a big thing, where their breaking points are, and how to communicate with them. I'll be the first to say, I thought I knew how to talk to my kids. I thought I knew my children. I didn't. I didn't know my kids at all. Like I really had the worst time communicating with them, and I learned how to communicate with them, and in part was because of Tanya, right? That was a big thing. She pointed those things out. This is how Gianna thinks. This is how Jonathan takes things. This is how he's feeling. This is how no one needs to be done. And I was denied it until I sat there for like a month straight I was just frustrated with it, right? So then I learned, I just listened to what she had to say. I listened to the children, and I paid attention if I started doing certain things. With the entire schooling thing, it's, I believe in the socialism. I think the kids need to be social and interact with each other. But I know it's a hard thing to do, right? At this very moment, we have no idea what's happening. We don't know how fast. I technically don't believe we know how fast it's spreading, to be honest with you. And I don't. And with schools closing immediately, like I just heard Mawa schools closed the other day, and another high school just closed the other day, and I was like, it's happening all over again, right? So all of a sudden, there's a slight fear that, is this going to happen again? Are we all going to lose our jobs again? In my head, the whole thing was, everyone should just stay home from school, right? Like, if anything, the kids should just stay home and see how the remote learning. And I think it's going to be up to the parents to be those tutors or those support systems. And again, I have to give it up to my wife, because she is the best support person for our children at this point, because she does know them better than I do when it comes to the education. I have to say that she knows how to teach them better than I do. She really does. Like I'm not that person. I'll be dad all day long, but I just don't know how to translate that stuff. So that's basically my point of view. I just think that you have to really know the children, and I do believe the hard facts. I'm a very black and white person. I believe the cold facts are the way to go, because there's no reason to sugarcoat something. You just have to know the truth, and you also have to know the consequences. Unfortunately, right? And unfortunately, we're going through certain consequences at this point. And that's just my point of view.
Yeah. Thank you both, Vanessa and John, for sharing your perspective as parents. Both of you spoke about or alluded to the anxiety. You know, there are many people, there are many parents and guardians and children, right? Students, kids who are fraught with anxiety as well. So I think it's appropriate now to go to this question. I have a question here. My child is experiencing anxiety at the thought of returning to in-person school. What should I do? What do we say to a parent who is struggling with a child who may have those thoughts and those feelings and those emotions? What kind of advice, support are we able to give them? Anybody at all who would like to speak to that?
Okay, for me, so I believe in social, having a social friends, having companies, because I believe that it's good for their social life, their mental life, mental, health. Um, so I spoke to my daughter about it because the hybrid will be starting next week, I believe. So I spoke to my daughter that okay, I really believe that you should go to school. I mean, it's only twice a week, so I think that's reasonable. That for you to just go, and because of her friends are not going, the parents chose to let their children stay. So she said to me that she's not gonna have any friends there. Um, so I don't know. For that's really hard.
It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard.
So I said, just remember when the first day of school, that you didn't know anybody there. But you know, of course, kids gonna reason out. But I said, just try it out. See it for, go for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, let's talk about it, reevaluate it. Let's see how you feel about it then. Because we still have the choice to um, have them complete virtual learning. So I said, let's talk about it again after 2 weeks and we'll make a decision then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult, right? It's difficult on all fronts. What do we do with a child who is experiencing that anxiety? I'm not sure if anybody else would like to speak to that.
I think it's important to understand what's causing the specific anxiety. What exactly is it that they're afraid of? And trying to listen and understand from their viewpoints, because the default factor is for us to look at things through the way we see them. And we have to be careful because that may cause the child more anxiety, because they may not feel as if they're being heard, or the fears that they're having may not be rightly identified, right? And I think, for Christian parents, of course, we of course want to let them always know um, the biblical perspective on fear, but I also think that we want to be able to work with them and to hear them out and to see. For some kids, it may have been that they may have had anxieties that you did not really know about as much, that were kind of like covered up a bit. And now, because of the pandemic, they're more exposed.
Mhm.
They're a lot more exposed and a lot more heightened. And so making sure that they're aware, if they are going to go to school anyway, because the parent feels that's best for the child. I would say it's really important to let the school know that the child is having that kind of anxiety and fear about school, so that they can get additional support for them. And I think, like, starting off things little by little, if the child is, well, I don't want to be around other people, because there's a lot of different fears with COVID. For some, unfortunately, I've had students who have, lost family members as a result of it, who have been sick themselves, or who have seen family members sick, or friends sick, or someone knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who has, and those are real. Those are real fears, because see, the adolescent, they don't see themselves as mortal just quite yet. They know they are, but the way they think and process life is quite differently. So again, understanding those fears and, you know, that those realities, and giving them an opportunity to share and to make peace with the trauma. It's been traumatizing. We've had students that have been traumatized because, you know, families are, you know, I'm left alone because everyone's sick with COVID. I have to care for my family because people are, you know, I know someone or a friend. So those kinds of thoughts can really permeate. So I think, again, you have to know your child, but I think the key is to listen and to deal with the anxiety, because unless you deal with the anxiety, it will just return in a different way. It will manifest in a greater level if it's not appropriately dealt with, you know, as a result.
Another piece of this is I teach kindergarten, and already you have the little ones coming to school. They already have separation anxiety, you know, not wanting to leave their parents in a normal school year, right? And it takes time for them to realize you're safe at school, you'll go back home to your family, it'll be okay. Well, now they're only coming to school 2 days a week. And so it seems like the warm up is taking much longer. So it's not just even just the anxiety of the you know, the virus itself, but also within families. Families have now been brought together, right? They've been in quarantine together, they've been bonding, and now there's that separation of having those kids having to go to school and be separated and having to think for themselves and having to get back in routines. So there's another facet to that.
And I just want to add, just to be patient with your child. That's important, to be patient with them as they are, you know, learning to get over and to deal with their anxiety. I just think that's really important for everyone, you know, and to, you know, whether it's grandparents or uncles and aunts, teachers, everyone, to be patient and to be a support for the child. So when you feel supported, you're more likely to feel stronger, and as a result, more likely to overcome, you know, the obstacles and fears that you have.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's hard to believe, but we have about 5 minutes left of our panel discussion. It's been a wonderful time. I hope for those of you who are watching that you feel informed, that you feel encouraged, that you have that renewed sense of hope. What I'd like to do now is just open the floor to all of the panelists. Do you have any parting words, any last thoughts that you would like for our viewers to hear from your perspective as we get ready to close out our session on school reentry? Anyone at all, feel free to share, to speak.
This is Dr. Icy. So I would just say, we know that the flu season is coming up. We know that our children are going to be possibly getting, you know, sick with fevers, etc. Make sure that you're engaging in healthy activities for them. Even though that it's a time that a lot of us are virtual, we should not allow them to just sit in front of the television or in front of their video games. Please try to incorporate physical activity so that they stay strong. Please try to incorporate healthy foods, even though everybody's inside, you know, so you tend to eat snacks and all these different things. Just make sure that they're having water, lots of fruit and vegetables, the greens, the reds, the yellows, fruit, vegetables, etc. Make sure that they're having that. In terms of building the immune system, there's certain vitamins that may be helpful in building your immune system. Vitamin C is one. Vitamin D has been particularly helpful as it relates to COVID. B complex is always good for your heart. They also mentioned zinc. Okay, so just make sure that your kids, if you give them a simple multivitamin, then that's great. I would encourage people to have these items in their home and maybe get them now before they become, again, you know, absent on the shelves. Have a thermometer, a good grade thermometer. Make sure you have a thermometer that's the no touch variety, but a good one. And make sure you have the batteries there. I would invest if you are able to in something called a pulse oximeter. And it's something that goes onto your finger, but it tells you your oxygen levels. So sometimes people are not aware, especially during COVID, that their oxygen levels are low. But if your oxygen level falls below 90%, that could be critical. So if you see that, if someone's not feeling well and you do their oxygen level and you see that it's low, then you know it's time to go in. And then for the parents and grandparents, picking up a blood pressure monitor. Okay, so those are the 3 items you want to have in your home that may be helpful during the fall if, COVID re-enters, so to speak.
Dr. Icy, can I ask you to repeat those 3 things again? I know people are viewing and they might not have heard just the name of the 3 things again. I missed the pulse oximeter. Could you repeat that again?
Sure. So the thermometer, a good one, okay, have your batteries. A pulse oximeter is a little gadget that goes over your finger that measures the level of oxygen, the percentage of oxygen in your body. And so people's oxygen should be 90 or above, ideally 95 and above. So if you start to fall below 90%, that's an issue. And then a blood pressure monitor. If you can pick one up, they're relatively inexpensive at any pharmacy, and that gives you both the blood pressure and the heart rate. So if your heart rate starts to raise, for instance, you'll be able to see that. That's an indication something's going on, or you'll know if your blood pressure is too high or too low. And so these are good things to have. And even if you're doing telehealth or telemedicine with your doctor remotely, you're able to give them all these information. They'll be able to tell you, you know what, you can ride this out at home versus, you know what, you need to get into an emergency situation of care right away. So those are helpful to have.
Wonderful, thank you. Other parting words in our last minute or so together?
I would say once again, make sure that your child has a routine, whether they're hybrid or whether they're remote. Make sure you're familiar with the education plan that your school has. And I would really say reach out to the teachers and the school administration there. Don't be afraid to ask for support or help if you feel that your child needs it or you need it for guidance. And I would just say, even if your child's suffering from anxiety, don't be afraid to reach out for help also, because I think that is something that's very important. And again, be patient with your child and with yourself. And so it's just, really important for families to just know that schools are working with them and for them to do the best that we can, and that they're there to serve and help the families.
Amen, amen. Okay, well, it has been such a wonderful hour with all of you. We thank you again to all of our panelists, to Grace, to Min, to Vanessa and John, and Dr. Icy, and to Hazel. Thank you so much. This has been so informative, and I know that this is a great resource that parents and guardians and all of us really are going to be able to put in our tool belt, if you will. And thank you again to those of you who joined us today. We want to leave you with just an encouraging reminder of what Philippians 4 verses 6 and 7 says. Do not be anxious about anything. And anything certainly extends to our current situation and our children. But in every situation, with prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, you're going to present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts, not only your hearts, but your minds in Christ Jesus. So we have given you wonderful information, but we want you also to feel encouraged. God's got you in the palm of his hands, and he's sovereign. And so we trust him with our days. Thank you again for joining us. Again, we're going to select 5 of you viewers who are going to receive Dr. Icy's resources. And also we're going to put her the information for her books on our website and on our social media, so that if you would like to purchase that, you can as well. Thank you again to the panelists. It was a wonderful night. God bless. Take care. Until we see you again at our next Table Talk, where we're going to lay it all on the table. Have a good night. God bless.